how beautiful that the sun is shining. I've come out to make this tribute to Dee Sunshine. It's a lovely blue sky day here in Cressbrookdale. It's just so healing to be out here in nature, and despite the chainsaws whirring on the other side of the dale in the background. But yeah, I have a very heavy heart this week to hear that Dee Sunshine passed away on Sunday night. And he was an old friend of mine, a former lover of mine, and back in 2015. And I last saw him in the summer. He actually came up here to Cressbrookdale to walk the land, and then we went to the All About Love festival, and we camped out. Well, he was in his camper van and I was in a tent next door, next to his van, and we went to All About Love in the summer, which was great. And he was fine, you know. He was in a really positive space, and he'd had an unfortunate, and I don't quite know how he came to get the diagnosis, but he'd had an unfortunate diagnosis from the NHS that he had a heart condition, and that he had a sort of 50-50 chance of living a normal life. Put it this way, it wasn't a helpful diagnosis, and he had previously survived an NHS diagnosis when he was a lot younger. I think he had a brain tumour, and he was told he only had 6 months to live, and he ended up healing, and he lived, you know, I think that was in his 30s or something, when he was a lot younger. I don't know the exact detail. Yeah, so energetically, it can be a very tricky thing to transcend a diagnosis, and there is, I read somewhere, there's statistical research that most people, if they're given an NHS diagnosis or any medical diagnosis that they've got X amounts of weeks or months to live, that most people, the majority of people, pretty much kind of die to order. So you could either say, well, it was a pretty accurate diagnosis, or you could say, well, it was the kind of placebo effect kicking in. You know, if someone who you place a lot of trust in says, oh, you've only got 6 weeks to live, you know, that's quite a strong curse, shall we say, to transcend energetically. But Dee, I know that Dee was determined to live, and he wanted to live life to the full. And I really recommended to him, because he'd actually signed up to the Lakshmi Mandala for 2024, and I was encouraging him to kind of share his journey with others, and he wanted to make plans, because that's one thing. If, you know, obviously if you're it helps to be visioning things into the future, so planning into the future. And so he actually got a column with medium.com, but unfortunately he called his column Dead Man Talking, which again is that's a bit of a tricky spelling. And when we went to All About Love, he was talking about doing the Camino del Santiago, I think it's called, Santiago walk in Spain, which is kind of like a pilgrimage, and he'd done it once before, but he decided he wanted to do it again, but he wasn't sure whether he should or not. And so I had my tarot cards with me, and we did a reading on whether he should do the Camino del Santiago again. And it was a kind of Celtic cross reading where it's where he drew the cards. And the interesting thing about the cards he drew was that he drew the entire kind of royalty of the cups. So he drew the Page of Cups, the Knight of Cups, the Queen of Cups, and the King of Cups. And of course, Cups is hearts. And the outcome of the reading was the Fool. So it was a strong reading, and of course the Fool is very symbolic of our kind of human journey through life. It's like the Fool is the zero, and it going round in a circle, and he's kind of tripping with a knapsack along a kind of mountain path. You could equally, so it was very easy to vision Dee as just with his backpack doing that walk, but equally you could, on a stark interpretation of that card, say that he was a fool to do it. But I know that he was determined to live life to the full, and he did set off to do Camino del Santiago, but within a few days he felt very ill and had to fly back home, and was really ill, went back to Findhorn. He was living up at the Findhorn community in Scotland, where he had a kind of he had a kind of mobile home caravan which he had renovated, and he was actually a very brilliant artist, Dee. I'll talk a bit more about him, but I just wanted to kind of run through the sequence of events, and then his symptoms descended into pneumonia, and he went to Aberdeen Hospital, and I think that I know that Dee was resisting the idea of having any kind of operation, but I think that by that point he had succumbed to the idea that he would need an operation. Then he was so ill with the pneumonia, and I think he was in a lot of pain and discomfort. I don't know, but I suspect he discharged himself and went back to Findhorn to convalesce, and maybe had just decided that now was his time. And he wasn't responding to any messages or texts by this point. I think he must have been just too ill. And we'd been chanting for him in our morning mantra group, and Lucidia suggested that I call Findhorn and get an update, which I did on Monday morning, only to find that he'd passed over on Sunday night. So it was very sad, and I think his funeral is as soon as this Thursday or Friday, so I am going to go up there, and he's going to be buried at Findhorn, which is an amazing community up in Scotland. It was actually formed in 1962, which was the year of Dee's birth. He was a 1962 water tiger. So it's very sad, and I would like to just pay a little tribute to Dee, because he was an amazing, a very unusual guy, and a very interesting man. And I actually met him through Facebook back in probably 2014, 2015 time. Certainly I was in correspondence with him on Facebook. This story actually starts in Stonehenge, of all places, because I had a friend, David Rowan, who's a bit of a kind of wizard druid guy. He was an expert on Stonehenge, and he used to do these tours and sort of private tours, meditation tours into Stonehenge. And so he'd invited me on one of these tours, and he was also an astrologer, and I remember that Mars and Venus were conjunct in Virgo, and it was a full moon or a new moon. I think it was a new moon. And they may have even been conjunct the new moon. Because I think it was in August, late August. So yeah, it may well have been a new moon in Virgo. But this is back in, I think, in 2015. And it was I was in Stonehenge, and I'd set an intention to attract in a new relationship, and obviously Mars and Venus are the planets of the masculine and feminine. The interesting thing is this guy David Rowan, I later found out that is Dee's original name, Rowan, Dee Rowan. So the initials of David Rowan, Dee Rowan, is exactly the same as Dee Sunshine. So I set this intention, and meanwhile, Dee, he asked me for some mentoring, business mentoring support. I was doing a lot of business mentoring back in those days, but he didn't have a huge amount of available funds. So he suggested that we do a kind of exchange for me doing some mentoring, and he would do some tantric yoga and some tantric massage. Now, as I've said in previous videos, I'm very much a person who kind of says yes and shows up to interesting invitations. So, and I love Scotland as well. He was living up at Fort William at the time, so I said, yeah, okay, sure, I'll come up and spend a couple of days with you. So I drove up to Fort William. It's on the west coast of Scotland. Dee is originally from Paisley in Glasgow, so he had a very Glaswegian working class upbringing, and he actually had quite a lot of a difficult childhood, shall we say. There was a lot of trauma in his childhood, I know that much. But he'd kind of lifted himself out of that, and he'd got himself on the kind of path of Tantra and spiritual healing. He spent a lot of time in India, and he was, as I say, he was very creative. He was an artist and a poet, very much into mysticism and, as I say, Tantra. And he'd done a lot of tantric workshops out in the Far East. So I went up there just completely, just like open as I normally do, and just say yes, show up. And I'd never had a tantric massage before, and it was quite interesting. It's a very sacred process, and it kind of starts with a sort of meditation where you sit opposite one another, and then he sort of goes through the chakras, and kind of there's a sort of meditation, alignment, sort of sacred ceremony before the massage starts. And it was interesting because during that, and I'd never met the guy before, but during that little ceremonial process, when I opened my eyes, I saw that he had turned into Krishna. And it was just like, what? And then he changed back again, and it was like I caught a glimpse of Krishna. And it was kind of like, whoa, this is kind of weird. You may not know about tantric massage, or may never have experienced it, but it's a full body massage, but it's also an internal massage, and it's actually deeply healing. And it was interesting because he reversed my menopause. How old was I back then? 2014, so early 50s. Yeah, he actually that tantric massage reversed my menopause, because I'd my periods had stopped, and I was having hot sweats and all these things. And actually my periods restarted, the hot sweats ended. And because I've had 5 children, I do get that, I got a lot of trauma in my sacral through 5 childbirths, NHS, not necessarily very natural childbirth, shall we say. And I got that it was very, very deeply healing. And we did some yoga together. And then on this, I think it was the second night I was there, I had a very, very vivid dream where I had a very strong instruction to go to St Mary's Road. And we'd already decided to go to Findhorn. So Dee looked up the route and discovered that there was a St Mary's church en route between Fort William and Findhorn, which is up near Inverness. So we said, okay, when we drive up there, let's go to St Mary's Church and see what's there, what this message is. And it turned out to be one of those kind of Scottish Presbyterian, I think is that the right word, churches, which are very kind of very plain and quite dour churches, just a sort of square box, and not very decorative, not very ancient, quite sort of Victorian. And all there were these 2 statues, and I found myself standing in front of the statue of Jesus, all in red, surrounded by red candles. And I looked across, and there was Dee standing in front of the Mother Mary, all dressed in blue, surrounded by blue candles. And we kind of looked across at one another. And we just like, well, there's nothing much here, maybe it was just all a bit of a cosmic confusion. And we just set off on to Findhorn, and we went to this vegan bed and breakfast. Dee was a vegan at this point. We went to this B&B run by this lady who she used to work at Findhorn, or used to be part of the council of elders there. And so she showed us up to our room, and she put me in this red room, this deep red room, Jesus red room, and she put Dee in next door in the blue room, which was a Mother Mary blue room. And it was like, oh my God, literally these rooms were the exact colours of these two statues. Anyway, so we did a bit of a sightseeing and went to Findhorn, and then that night we went to bed. I locked my door, and I had these 3 really incredible dreams. And in the first dream, I was outside this house, and inside the house was a ceremony, and all of these statues, there were these incredible statues inside of Ganesh and spiritual beings and lights and candles burning and people inside doing this amazing ceremony. And then in the second part of the dream, I was flying over the ocean. It was kind of like quite an incredible dream. And then in the third part of the dream, Dee came into my room, in my dream this was, because the door was locked. So it couldn't have happened in reality. And he just kind of held me, just like, not in a sexual way, just held me in a really kind of strong, healing way. It was just like, whoa. And there was also this book on the bookshelf in the room, this Carlos Castaneda book, and I was just sort of pretty much getting into shamanism at that point. So I opened this Carlos Castaneda book with interest, and inside was this bookmark, which was like a sort of ticket flyer, little bookmark for this Krishna and Radha art exhibition. And I thought, I felt very symbolic, so I kept it. I kept this little bookmark. So anyway, we had a nice time, and then I went back home, but I'd invited Dee to come along to a shamanic ceremony that was happening in Glastonbury that I'd planned to go to. And I said, come along, because it's very healing and he might enjoy it. And so he came down, and we went together to that. And it was quite interesting because before the ceremony, I pulled a tarot card, and it was the King of Cups. And I'd still had this intention to manifest this relationship. And so did the ceremony, and in the ceremony they started singing Hare Krishna. And Dee was on my right hand side. He was lying next to me in the ceremony. And so they were singing Hare Krishna, and I was kind of saying I was kind of offering up this question of like this relationship and this man that I wanted to manifest. And it's just like, we've sent you Krishna, haven't you noticed yet? Why haven't you noticed? We've already sent him to you. Why haven't you noticed? Sitting right next to me. And it was a very definite sign from spirit. And so so it was very bonding to go to that ceremony. And so we decided next day to go down to Glastonbury. We were close to Glastonbury. We went into Glastonbury, and we actually stayed at Healing Waters, which is Juliet's sanctuary, and stayed there. And then the next day we went up to the tour, and we basically opened into a relationship together. And so pretty much immediately, sorry, this is kind of a bit of a winding story. So pretty immediately he moved in. He moved into my house, because I was living up here in Bakewell. I was still in my big house on the hill, and he moved in. And so it was a very intense time of being with him. And we also decided to go to Peru together. But by the time came, the Peru trip was in November. Our relationship was really was really strong, and it was a lot to hold. I mean, we're both very strong characters. He's a tiger, I'm a dragon, and both very strong-willed characters. And I just remember going to Peru with Dee, and there was a whole group of us. It was a spiritual pilgrimage, and there was maybe about 16 of us on this trip. So we'd gone to Cusco and to Chinchero, and we'd made some ayahuasca with the shamans. So all of the group, we'd made our own ayahuasca, and it takes 5 days to brew. And then later in the trip, we went up to the mountain, to Mount Apu Azangate. So these mountain spirits are incredibly strong. So Apu Azangate is a community mountain. It's a tribal mountain. And so we trekked all the way up to the lagoon, and it was very exhausting, and Dee by this point was really complaining, and they put us on these 2 horses. It was just like it was just so perilous getting up the mountain to this lagoon on these horses that were literally plodding along these rocky, narrow paths, and with a sheer ravine fall. Like if we'd fallen off, it would have been like the end. So it was kind of one of those initiations. So we got up to this lagoon, and only 7 people out of the 16 elected to take the ayahuasca, and I was the first person who went up for the cup. And if you've ever done ayahuasca, you'll know that quite often it can be quite old and sort of has been festering in someone's cellar for several months. But of course this has been freshly made, so it's kind of Premier Cru, like Premier Cru champagne. Very light and fizzy and fresh, and it was very easy, very drinkable. But as soon as I drank it, I was just like, oh my god, the power of it. Because of course this group that had manifested was quite dysfunctional, and it had the energy of all 16 people in this medicine, and I knew we were in for a bumpy ride. And Dee took the second cup, and we very quickly went into this like very deep medicine journey. And he was having a very hard time and was sitting on a rock, and I was next to him, and I turned into this tulip, like a yellow and red variegated tulip with these huge green leaves, and I wrapped my leaves around him while Davina was on the other side. She was kind of clearing his energy through, and he was going through a very dark, deep process. And anyway, he got through it and purged through it. And then we were standing, then we took a little walk, and we were standing by this lagoon. And he said to me, I want you to be Rachel Sunshine. So basically asked me to marry him. And it was amazing, because the sky just like lit up with these psychedelic firework display of this amazing Rachel Sunshine. Hold on, there's a car coming. Hold on, wait. Hold on. Oh my goodness. A little bit of peril there. Yeah, so the sky lit up with this psychedelic display of like, oh wow, how amazing. Like these psychedelic, colourful fireworks. And then immediately I was taken from this incredible rainbow display and taken down, deep into the earth, and shown all of the hoochah that I would have to clear to become Rachel Sunshine. And of course I took this as a sign from the medicine that it was a very bad idea to marry Dee. And of course, a proposal made under the influence of medicine is probably not one to kind of needs some sort of rational 3D thought, shall we say. But I do get, looking back, that that was very early on in my journey through shamanism and through medicine work. And I would say that I have cleared a lot of that hoocha since then on my own path. But yeah, so it was quite funny because our relationship did deteriorate. So by the end of that trip, I mean, it's very triggering to go on a pilgrimage like that, a shamanic pilgrimage, and so by the end of our 2 weeks, I think it was 2 weeks, 10 days, 2 weeks, it was strong and it was deep and very triggering. By the end of it, literally, Dee just wanted to get the hell back home, wasn't talking to me, and it was quite an interesting thing because we went to the airport and we kind of split up, and we both he asked for a different seat away from me, and I separately, when I went to the desk, I said, could I change for a window seat, please? And so we both changed seats. The funny thing was, when we got on the plane, they'd moved us to 2 seats together. And he took one look at me and he said to the air hostess, he said, I want to move. And so the air hostess says, I'm sorry, sir, but this is a completely full flight. There's nowhere I can move you to. You'll have to stay here. Oh, it was very funny looking back. A little cosmic joke there. So we went back to the UK and we did have a little bit of a reconciliation where I went to Edinburgh and spent some time with him after things had calmed down. So we had a very healing weekend where we went up to, there's a kind of rock outside Edinburgh above Scottish Parliament. It was a very windy day and we did some songs up there. He brought his little ukulele and we were singing together. And it was very sweet. I think he deleted them off YouTube, actually. So yeah, I didn't see him for a while. He went back to India. And then we tried to have a little reconciliation. Come on, this way. We tried to have a little reconciliation when I moved out to the mansion in 2016, when he came back from India. And we thought, maybe, because I had that place for a year, and he thought maybe he could do some sort of Tantric workshops and help me running the place. But again, it was such a tempestuous relationship by that point. But just to say about Dee, he was a very strong character, but he was amazingly artistic, very creative. I remember one time he was very good at decorating, and he did these incredible interiors in everywhere he lived. He was very good at creating beautiful spaces. I remember one time when I had to go away somewhere when we were staying at the house, and when I came home he'd painted my office pink, and it was really beautiful and sweet. And he also painted my son's room kind of like a sunshine yellow colour. We painted it together, actually. He had a really amazing eye for colour and art. And I'll include, he gave me this little sketch that he'd done. I'll include it in this video. It's a very beautiful sketch which I had framed. He used to do these little black and white rotring illustrations. Absolutely beautiful and so creative. And he also wrote 2 books of poetry. He probably wrote more than that, but he gave me 2 books of poetry. I was trying to find them this week, so I'm sure I'll come across them. So he was a very, very creative, amazing guy. I know that he did also have a lot of sadness in his life, and I know that he was estranged from his daughter. He had a daughter, Dee Sunshine, and that was one of the great sadnesses of his life, that he wasn't in touch with Rosie. And I think when you have a heart condition, energetically it does speak to having a broken heart. And so I do think that he had a lot of tragedy and sadness in his life, but he was an incredibly positive and amazingly spiritual guy. And I think he just decided in the end that it was his time. And And I think he knew the truth, that, you know, we're all eternal beings having a human experience, and there does come a time for us to shed this mortal skin. So I was very sad to hear the news that he'd passed over on Sunday, although I know he was in a lot of pain, and I think maybe he just decided that enough was enough. So, sending you lots of love, and I just wanted to do this message. And I did meet his mum when I went up there to Fort William. So, sending so many condolences to his mum and his family, and to everyone who knew Dee. I think he made a lot of friends over the years in his travels, and everything that he was a real people person, a real man of the people. And he was part of the love party as well. He joined the love party. He was very much into Jeremy Corbyn, actually, in his time. Very, very Glaswegian, and very socialist at heart, a real people person. So that is my little tribute to Dee, and just wanted to share some happy memories and funny memories of our time together. And it was great that I saw him this summer again, and he really was in such a great space of positivity and hope. So I really did believe that he would make it through, but unfortunately it was not to be. Anyway, lots of love, and sending you healing vibes from a very beautiful blue sky and sunshiny Crossbrookdale. Lots of love. Bye for now. Namo Amitabhaya.